Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome, Zadie. Welcome, Andrew. Welcome, Erwin, Melissa, and all those who will be logging on with us shortly. Or who knows, maybe I'll be surprised and someone will join me in person here. I need to figure out a system. It's on me. I know technically it's not yichud because the shul is open to members to come at any point, but I don't like the idea of myself being here if just like one woman or someone shows up, even though we're on Zoom. We need to figure out a system for me to know whether people will show up or not, or whether I should be in the shul. But that's something to put on the side. If any of you have ideas of a good system for me to figure, maybe it just means a weekly email. I just don't want to spam you guys, but I'll figure it out. Okay, so we are on Chav Dalet Amud Aleph. We are on 24a. This is a long one. But as the general principle goes, generally, like you're learning a Tosfos, you're learning a Gemara, generally the longer pages are easier than the shorter ones. Why? Because the fact that there's more Gemara is because there was less commentary on the Gemara. Why is there less commentary on the Gemara? Probably because the Gemara is not so complicated and didn't necessitate. Look at this. There's literally no Tosfos. The Bali Tosos literally have nothing on this entire daf. Well, Ahmed at least. Let's say that much. What's the other? So what do we have on the other side? Oh, we do have something right at the end. Okay, entire Ahmed. I stand corrected. So this is going to be a little bit. So usually when it's longer, it means actually the content is easier. There are exceptions to the rule, but this is not one of the exceptions. So this is all a Gadata toward the end. Nothing of a purely halachic nature here. So what the majority of this Gemara is going to be is essentially, we just learned that there were 613 mitzvos in the Torah. Hopefully that's something we learned at some point in our education. And what's going to happen is David HaMelech, Yeshayahu Hanavi, others who come after him, they're basically looking at their current generation. And, basically this supports the idea of Yeridas Hadoros, of the degradation of the generations, that with each ensuing generation, we get further from our Sinai and we are less than those who came before us. That's actually what's happening here in the Gemara. Because what David HaMelech is about to do, we're 3 lines from the top, Ba David Vamidan Achas Yisrael. Even though there are 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, came along David HaMelech, and David HaMelech whittled it down to 11 commandments. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that David HaMelech was a reform rabbi, and he's like, we'll get rid of the mitzvahs we don't like, and we'll only keep the mitzvahs sort of that we do like, and we're only going to keep 11 out of 613. What it means is that David HaMelech chose to emphasize 11 principles. You'll see these not all of them necessarily fall into strict halachic mitzvos, but we're going to talk about things that are more general midos as well. And this is what David decided was best for his generation to emphasize. Now, where does David emphasize 11 qualities that a person should have? T'chsiv, as he writes in his book, in Tehillim, which this is Kapitel Tesvav. This is number 15, Psalm 15. Mizmor leDavid Hashem mi yagor ba'ohalecha mi yishkom b'har kadshecha. Who will live in your tents, and who will dwell on your mountain? So basically, we're describing somebody who is dedicated to God. Holich tamim upoel tzedek, someone who walks in completeness and his acts are just. Bidover elmis belvavo, and speaks truth in his heart. Lo raga al shono, he doesn't speak ill of others, doesn't slander. Lo asa l're'ehu, ra, so he doesn't do evil unto others. The cherpa lo nasa al krovo, and he doesn't allow humiliation to come upon those who are close to him, his relatives. Nivza be'enov nimas, those who are despicable are likewise in his eyes. Vesirei Hashem yichabed, but those who fear God he honors. Nishba laharav lo yamir, and if he takes an oath that's to his detriment, he will not seek to revoke it. Kaspo lo nasan ben neshech. He does not give his money to earn ribis, to earn interest off of it. V'shochad al naki lo lakach, and he does not take a bribe from those who are clean, those who are pure. Osa ela, anyone who does these, lo yimot lo olam, they shall never falter. Those are the 11 principles. Now, some of these very obviously require elucidation because, wait a minute, you're telling me that you're such a pious person for not taking a bribe? I'm pretty sure that's a baseline expectation of the Torah for any individual in a position of judgment, position of power. You're not supposed to be taking bribes. So why is this considered extra credit? Why is this the icing on the cake? So here we go. Holech Samim. We're going to break down each and every one of these 11. Number 1, Holech Tamim. Ze Abram. This refers to Abram Avinu, to Siv. Hisalech lefanai v'yesamim. Shall walk before me and be complete. Number 2, Poel Tzedek. What's it mean to work justly? Kagon Abba Chilkiyahu. Now, who? Great, like Abba Chilkiyahu, Shkoyach. Anyone know who Abba Chilkiyahu was? So, Abba Chilkiyahu, it's toward the end of time. Sorry?
Grandson of Choni Hamiyago.
Oh, that's very good. Who is it? Is that Arthur? I can't. Who just spoke?
That's me. I'm just reading.
It's me. Yeah. Oh, Andrew. Oh, your voice sounds like Arthur. Huh.
That's a compliment.
Maybe it's still on the recording. Okay, very good. Now, the story that we have in mind here is from the Gemara Maseches Tainus on Chaf Gimel Amid Aleph, I believe, which a bunch of rabbis want to consult him. Right? I think you're right. I think it's after the Choni Hamago's story, and they wanted him to help them out as well, if memory serves. So these rabbis approach him while he's working in the field. He's working, I think, as a sharecropper for somebody else, or he's on the clock. So he doesn't even respond to the people who come to him, who give him greetings, because lest he take time that he's being paid for and use it for his own needs. So he was so scrupulous about other people's money. So that's what it means, someone who his deeds, when he works justly. That's Abba Chilkiyahu. Number 3, V'dover emes bolvavo, K'on Rav Safra. So who was Rav Safra? You take a look in the Rivan toward the end. So the Rivan tells us a story from about Rav Safra. Rav Safra was in the middle of davening, he was in the middle of Kriya Shema. And as we very well know, Kriya Shema, one's not allowed to talk, not just because of decorum, but one's not allowed to make a hefsek, an interruption in the middle of Shema, except for very extenuating circumstances. An individual came over to buy something from Safra, and he assumed the fact that Safra did not reply to him, he was ignoring him, was because he wasn't interested in the low price that he was being offered for that particular item. So what happened? The guy kept saying, "Oh, okay, I see you're ignoring me. I'll give you 500. Oh, I'll give you 600, 700. By the time he was done with Kriya Shema, he had a lot of kavana. It went from $500 to $2,000. Afterwards, Rav Safra says to the guy, "Look, when I heard you give me offer for 500 originally, I was okay with that. I'm not going to make you lose out because I was davening Shema, so I'm going to sell to you for 500. That's considered a very high level of integrity, and that's why we refer to Rav Safra when we talk about what's meaning Dover Emes Bolvavo, speaking truth that comes from your heart. That's number 3. Now number 4. Lo raga al lishono. So who do we think is somebody who doesn't speak ill, somebody who doesn't slander, someone who doesn't lie? Ironically, Ze Yaakov Avinu, it's the first of Yaakov Avinu, to Siv, as written, Ulai Musheni Aviv. Maybe my father, when he feels me, he'll realize that I'm Yaakov and not Esau, and I'll become this fool this guy who tried to fool him in his eyes. So this is funny. Why is Yaakov taken as the paradigm for speech? If anything, Yaakov lied his way to the bracha. Now, maybe it was permissible, maybe it was justified, but certainly as a paradigm, we see Titin Emes Yaakov. that we associate Yaakov with truth, with emes, that's very difficult to understand. Any ideas?
He was obeying his mother.
Okay, well, if my mother tells me to light a fire on Shabbos, I'm not allowed to listen to her. So
Maybe he was expert at this issue, so he was a good guy to follow. He knew exactly what would be at risk if you break it.
okay, but still, like to associate the idea of emes with Yaakov, it's difficult. So I'll tell you, the Maritz Chias, he says actually there's a reason that we quoted this pasuk in particular to, because you don't really see anything in this pasuk that talks about truth telling. But if you look at the formulation, it says Ulai Yimusheni Avi. Now, the proper formulation, if Yaakov was afraid lest Yitzchak come to feel him and realize that he's not Esav, it should say Pen Yimusheni Avi. Pen is usually lest something happen. Ulai is, thinking about like in Slichos when we say maybe God will have mercy upon us. It's a hopeful maybe. I am hoping that perhaps this will, it's a perhaps this will happen. So actually, Yaakov, even though he was lying, deep down, he was hoping, perhaps my father might feel me, he'll recognize the ruse, and I won't have to be a deceiver. So, and that's why Yaakov is the truth teller. Even when he had to do, even was necessary, Yaakov Avinu still didn't want to do it. He was very reluctant. Okay. Now, number 5. Lo asalarehu ra. Someone doesn't do evil to his friend. Well, what does that mean specifically? Sholo yara l'umas chaver. Someone who doesn't go into his friend's trade. This is the idea of a sagas rule, that if my friend has an apple stand and he makes his living off it, and I set up a rival apple stand right near him, and I deprive him of his livelihood, that's called being yard l'umas chaver. The cherpa lo nasa al krovo. Now, what's it mean? Someone doesn't allow cherpa, to allow humiliation come upon his krovim, his relatives, or those who are close to him. Zeh makarev es krova. This is someone who brings his krovim closer. Rivan says, lo sabal cherpas krovo. He doesn't allow humiliation to come upon those who he's close with. Perhaps he brings them closer to the right path. Nivzeh be'inav nim'as. What does that mean? This is someone who despises those who despise God. And so Chizkiyahu HaMelech took his father, who was a great sinner, a great idolater, and when he was being buried, he didn't bury him with the proper honors. He put him on this, literally a bed of ropes. I'm not really sure what that looks like per se, but it was a degrading way to carry him in the funeral ceremony. Whereas number 8, one is supposed to respect and honor those who are God-fearing. This refers to Yoshaphat, the king of Yehuda. Anytime he saw a Torah scholar, he would get up from his chair and he would embrace him and he would kiss him. And he would say, he would call him Avi, Avi, my father, Rabbi, Rabbi, Mari, Mari, my Rebbe, my Rebbe, my master. And he had such respect for Torah scholars. Number 9, Nishba laharav lo yamir, someone who takes an oath to his detriment, but does not seek to annul it. Rabbi Yochanan, this is a reference also, I believe, to a story in Maseches Tainis, where what happened was Rabbi Yochanan, I think he was at the house of a politician of Nasi there, and he didn't really trust their kashrus. But so what did he say? He said, "Oh, I'm fasting today. That's why I'm not eating any of your food." And the halacha is that one can't take on a fast for just part of the day. You have to take on a fast for the entire day for it to be chal. So technically, the fast that he claimed to have accepted upon himself would not be binding on him halachically. But nonetheless, since he said that he committed to it, he kept to it anyway. So even though he technically took an oath to his detriment, so to speak, nonetheless, he did not revoke it. Well, not that it didn't need revocation, it didn't need to, but he did it nonetheless. Kasbul anosim anasha. What does it mean? Someone who doesn't lend money on interest. I thought I'm not supposed to lend money on interest to anyone. Well, to Jews, but to non-Jews, technically one's allowed to lend on interest. So, and comes along the pasuk to tell us, even when I'm dealing with non-Jews, if I don't charge them ribis, that is seen as something that is laudable. We'll come back to that in literally one moment. The shochad al naki lo lakach. And what does it mean? Shochad. What's it mean? A person who doesn't take shochad from one who is naki. Kigon Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yossi. It's like the story of Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yossi. I don't know how the Gemara just assumes we know all these stories. So you look in the Rivan again, the Rivan toward the bottom of the right column. Kigon Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yossi. Shalai ariso maybe lo mishalo kodem zimano lo ratza likak de lios lo dai. Usually, when one gives me a bribe, they're giving me money that they own and they're transferring it to me. I now have more money in my bank account than I had previously. That's usually how bribes work. The case here was that Rabbi Yishmael bar Rav Yossi's sharecropper, who works for him on his field, gave him the food that he already owns. Just he brought it to him a little earlier than usual. And even though technically it's not shochet, it's technically not a bribe, because that is my food already. He's not giving me anything I don't already own. The fact that he brought it to me a little earlier maybe is some form of shochet. At least the extent that Shmuel bar Rav Yossi was concerned for it, and that's what it means. Someone who doesn't take shochet, not real shochet, but something that comes close to it. And again, this is a matter. All these things, for the most part, reflect someone who has very high integrity. That was something that David HaMelech emphasized. Now, I just want to go back a moment to number 10, where we talked about ribis, not lending on interest, even to a non-Jew. That's considered laudable. Now, when I first read that, the way I interpreted it, I'm sure maybe somebody else interprets it this way, is that there is an intrinsic value to not lending interest to a guy. However, if you look in the Rivan, he writes, why is it laudable? Why is it so special if I don't lend on interest to a non-Jew? Because lest I get used to lending on interest, and then I might lend to an actual Jew. I might lend to a fellow Jew and extract interest from them. So interestingly, the Rivan indicates that it's not really laudable to avoid taking ribis from a non-Jew, but it's just a way to get me used to not lending on ribis, lest I come to extract interest from a fellow Jew. You know what this reminds me of? It's like the discussion of Tsar Bali Chaim, why we're not supposed to gratuitously harm animals. Is it because there's an intrinsic? I'm not comparing non-Jews to animals, but just for the sake of a legal analogy, the reason that I'm not supposed to harm animals, one might say, is just intrinsically there's a value to respecting animals. They deserve our care, our respect. That would be one way to conceptualize it. But you look in the Ramban has a classic passage where he explains Shiluach HaKain, of why we send away the mother bird. And he said, look, let's be honest. If we really didn't want to cause any harm to animals, we would be vegans or vegetarians at least. We wouldn't be shechting them. We wouldn't have korbanos. We wouldn't have offerings in the Beis HaMikdash. Rather, why do we have these acts of kindness toward the animals? It's lahargil. It's to make me accustomed to treating human beings with dignity, with respect, and with sympathy. If I can bring myself to do it for an animal, then kal v'chomer, I'll get used to doing it for others. But then it's just a hechsher mitzvah. It's a means to an end. It's facilitating something. It's not a value to itself. So this is a much broader Jewish thought discussion to have. it would seem the classic sources, for the most part, see it as instrumental, though I'm sure there are some that say that there's an intrinsic value as well. Okay, let me just pause. Anything I can clarify at this point? Okay. Now, remember, it said at the end of the pasuk, "Siv osa ela lo yimod." Anyone who does all these things, they will never falter. Lo yimod lo olam. Kishahaya Rabbi Gamliel Magila Mikra Zel Haya Bochem. Rabbi Gamliel reached this pasuk. He began to cry. Amar Magda Avadu Lo Yimod. Achad Binayu Yimod. It's the implication of the pasuk is only he who observes all of these principles will never falter. But the implication is if I only keep to one of these principles, then I will falter. Amrulay, don't worry, he was consoled by others. Miksiv osa koila, osa eleksiv. But did it say he who does all of these principles? No, it says osa ela. Afila b'chadaminayu. Even if you just keep to one of these 11 principles, you're already in God's good graces. You will not falter. Dilo teimahi, because if you don't explain the verse this way, ksiv krach rina, there's another verse which would be very difficult to understand, where it says, Alti tama b'chol ela. Do not make yourself, do not defile yourself through all of these. Let's see, Dalid. Alti tama b'chol ela, ki b'chol ela nitmu hagoyim asharani meshalech mipneichem in Vayikra. So Hasam Nami Hanogea B'chol Ela Hudinatame B'chad Minayu Lo Ela Ba'achas Mikol Ela Hokanami Ba'achas Mikol Elu. So what? You're telling me all the things the Torah listed not to become tummy to? I have to first become tummy to all of them? I have to interact and have all of them to become tummy? No. What it means is if you have one of these items, then you become tummy, then you've defiled yourself. It doesn't mean everything you have to do. So similarly over here, you don't have to keep all 11 principles. It'd be nice, but even just keep one of them, the promise of that pasuk will come to fruition and you will not falter. Good. That was David HaMelech. In the era of David HaMelech, he emphasized 11 principles. But as generations went on, Ba Yishayahu v'midan al sheish. We are we're in the second to last small line. Ba Yishayahu v'midan al sheish. Yishayahu cut it almost in half down to 6 principles. Where does he state these 6 principles? The Siv, Holech Tzedakos, V'dover Meisharim. So, okay, one who walks in tzedakos righteousness, V'dover Meisharim, who speaks proper, upright words. Moes bebetza mashakos, who also despises oshek is like extortion, so making profit from extortion. Noer kapav mitmoch b'shochan, and he shakes off his palms, his hands, from holding shochad, bribery. Otim ozno mishmoa damim, who seals his ears from listening to blood. V'otim einav mira'os bara, and closes his eyes from seeing evil. Now, what do all these things mean? We'll break it down again. Number 1, Holech Tzedakos, the one who walks in righteousness. Zeh Avraham Avinu. This refers to Avraham Avinu. We're a big fan of Avraham Avinu, apparently. The Siv, Ki Yedati Laman Asher Yitzaveh. This is a continuation of pasuk on the side. Ki Yedati Laman Asher Yitzaveh Es Banav Es Beso Acharav V'Shamru Derech Hashem Las Staka Mishpat V'Man Havi Hashem Avram Es Asher Diber Alav. So God says the word Yada here means like Yediyah, like a relationship. So God was Yodea. God loved Abraham because Abraham instructed his household in the ways of God. So that's what it means Holech Tzedakos, that they should walk in the ways of God. And he instructed others, his household as well. Number 2, the Dover Meisharim. What is Dover Meisharim? except for being the name of the Sefer. So Dover Mesharim, Zesh Eno Maknit Pnei Chaver Barab. This refers to someone who doesn't embarrass his fellow individual in public. Moes Mashakos, what does it mean? Someone who despises making money from Osheka of an extortionary nature. Gagon Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, who I believe we had him earlier, right? Where was Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha? Right, he was in our list earlier, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody want to, where was it?
Earlier today.
I think we had Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha earlier, didn't we? Oh, you know what? No, never mind. I'm mixing him up with another name. Gagon Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha. So, what is the instance over there? So Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, this is the story. It's Dibra Maskell with Betza Mashakos in the Riban. Shelo Ratza Lito La'ato Reishis Hagesh, Shehedi Lo Adam Echad, Sheba Ladum Lefanav, Abba Gavdahawa Kohen, Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, Yishum Dami Ki'ilu Oshko Lakoin Sher Ragol Zalitin Lo Matnosa. So basically, there was someone trying to ingratiate himself with Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, who was a Kohen, and instead of giving to the usual Kohen the gifts, he wanted to give his gifts to Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha instead. Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha turned it down because he said, "Well, it's not right. This Kohen is relying on you to survive. You're always providing him with truma. You're providing him with the reish zagez. So you can't just give it to me. This guy has been expecting to get it from you." So that spoke to the integrity of Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha. That's number 3. Number 4. Noer kapav mitmoch b'shochad. So he shakes off his palms from holding bribes. Kagon Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yossi. Okay, Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yossi, he's the one that we had before. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yossi, just looking back up. Also, when we talk about shochad, the shochad al-naki l'loka kagon Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yossi. He was the one who didn't want to take an early deposit, however you want to put it, from his sharecropper. Otim azno mishma adam, number 5, someone who seals his ears from hearing about blood, because someone who doesn't listen to ill that is spoken about a Torah scholar and remains silent. You're going Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, like Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, who normally would stand up. One time he failed to stand up for the dignity of a Talmud Chacham, and he was punished on that account. Finally, someone who doesn't look at evil, at bad stuff. Rabbi Chia bar Abba, the Rabbi Abba, so, okay, a man, he has a choice to walk somewhere where there's no issues, or if he walks on a path where the women are in the river and that they are bathing and it's inappropriate to look. So someone who avoids going down a path where there's possible pritzus, even though he could avert his eyes, he can look away. Someone who makes sure to avert past where there's terrible things that they ought not to be looking at, that also is praiseworthy. And uksiv, and it's written, whom the Romim Yishkon, all these people, they will dwell on high with God. Those were the 6 principles of Yeshayahu. So we start with 11, we whittle it down to 6. How low can you go? Came along Micha and he whittled it down in half. He chopped it down to 3. Dichsiv. Higil Adam Matov Umashem Dorish Mimcha. What does God want from you? Kimasos Mishpat, but to do justice, Bahavas Chesed, and to love kindness, Behatznei Aleches Im Hashem Elokecha, and to walk humbly with the Lord your God. So 3 principles here. Number 1, Asos Mishpat, Zeh Hadin. This refers to rendering proper judgment. Number 2, Ahavas Chesed, self-explanatory. Zeh Gemilos Chasadim. This refers to doing acts of loving kindness. Batznei Aleches, and walking with tznius, with humbleness before God. This refers to one who provides for a funeral or for a wedding, that it should be done in a discreet fashion. So these are things that are not necessarily always done in private. Nonetheless, the Torah told us that these acts of chesed should be done in private. Kal v'chomer, giving money to someone who might be in dire straits, or someone who needs help making ends meet. Kal v'chomer, those are things that should also be done in a discreet fashion in order to, in case the person feels that it's undignified, that way you don't compromise them. Good. Now we're down to 3. How much lower can we get already? Chazer Yeshayahu went down to 2 principles. Excuse me. Shnemar, Ko Amar Hashem, Shimru Mishpat va'asu tzedakah, do justice and do tzedakah, do righteousness. Amos amidan al achas. And then came Amos, and he went even lower. Just one thing. What's that one thing? Shne'amar, Ko Amar Hashem, the Beit Yisrael, Dirshuni v'chayu. Very simple. Search me out, and you will live. And live. Maskevla Rav Nachum Bar Yitzchak, Ema Dirshuni v'chol Torah kula. Maybe this refers to keeping all 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. It's not just one thing. Shkoyach, keep the Torah, one mitzvah. Keep the Torah, that's 613 mitzvahs, plus mitzvahs and Torah abundant on top of that. Rather, rather, this one principle, that tzaddik in his faithfulness he shall live. So being generally faithful, whatever that means, faithful to God, that is how a person will live. And that's the one principle that he stressed. So amazing. We start with 613 mitzvahs. That was too much for us to focus on. We whittle it down to 11, to 6, to 3, 2, and 1. I don't know what we're up to today. Like we're in the negatives at this point, probably, right? I don't know what number we're up to these days. No, it's important, by the way, because sometimes, this is like, you look in the Kiruv literature, but it's not just from Kiruv, it could be for anyone. You grew up observant, have yeshiva day school education, but the important thing is that if someone tries to improve in all areas of observance, of halacha, or of learning, whatever it might be, in any area of Judaism, if you try to do everything well, then you're not going to do anything well. Now, it doesn't mean not to keep mitzvahs that I have a hard time with. What it means is that maybe in addition to the baseline that I'm supposed to do for each and every mitzvah I'm obligated in, I should find certain mitzvahs or midos that I can emphasize and I can specialize in. And so I think that's what the different leaders of the generation were doing. They were asking themselves, what kind of principles could we emphasize? Apparently, emphasizing integrity was very important. We see ribis, shochad, speaking the truth, not speaking ill of others, not embarrassing others. So integrity is a very important idea that was recurring through this list. Great. Any questions? Okay. Moving forward. That is the end of that section of the Gemara. That brought us pretty far down. We have one other section, and then we'll start the famous stories at the end of Makkos, where Rabbi Akiva laughs at the destruction of the temple. Arav Yossi Bar Chanina, Arba Gezeros Goser Moshe Rabbeinu al Yisrael, O Arba Nevim Ubitzim. This is very fascinating theologically. We're going to now see 4 statements, seemingly like 4 almost curses that Moshe Rabbeinu gave, and then a later prophet came, and I don't know what this even means. He overruled Moshe Rabbeinu. You'll see why this is very confusing. Moshe Amar. So here are the 4 examples. Moshe Amar, Vayishkon Yisrael Betach, Badad Ein Yaakov. that the Jewish people, they'll dwell securely and on their own when they have not ayin, but ain like Cain, when they have those who are like Yaakov among them. Now that's a very high standard. I don't know how many of us can say we are like Yaakov Avinu. Maybe you guys. But let's be honest, the average person is not Yaakov Avinu. But
I don't want to be like Yaakov.
I'm sorry?
I don't want to be like Yaakov. I want to be like Rachel.
Okay, so there you have it. It didn't say Cain Rachel, it said Cain Yaakov. So that's very difficult, right? If everyone's like Phyllis and just wants to aspire to be like Rachel, how are the Jewish people going to survive? So Amos Bitla came along Amos and he overruled it. Shenemar, as it stated, Chadal na mi yakum Yaakov. Please God, just relent at this point, refrain. How are we going to have someone arise who will be like Yaakov? Usiv nichem Hashem alzos, and it's written subsequently that God accepted his plea. Number 2, Moshe Amar, uvagoy vahem lo sargia, that when you are amongst these nations, you will have no tranquility, you'll have no rest for the weary. Yirmiyah, Amar, haloch largia Yisrael. God, please provide tranquility for the Jewish people.
Where was from the previous one? Where was that one? Where did God accede to the request? Where did that happen?
So it is. I'll give you the precise pasuk. Where's Muhammad? It's in Amos, in Sefer Amos. So and it's Perik Zion pasuk Hey through Vav. So it's the next pasuk. The next pasuk begins Nicham Hashem alzos.
Oh, I see. So he agrees right there, right on the spot. Okay.
Yeah, right there on the spot. It's literally the next pasuk. Now you have the creative part over here is that there's no indication that Amos is addressing that statement by Moshe Rabbeinu. It's Chazal who come along and say Moshe's reference to Yaakov and Amos' reference to Yaakov are no coincidence. Amos is responding to what Moshe Rabbeinu stated in the Torah. But yes, these two are sitting right next to each other. Good. Number 3. This is an important one over here. And this, I have to say, I have to look into more because out of all the things mentioned here theologically, this one it really requires further analysis. Moshe Amar, Pokein avos abanim, the Bayicheskel bitla hanevesh achutas isamus. Moshe Rabbeinu says in the Torah, a well-known line, that children will die on the account of their fathers. They will die due to their ancestors' sins. Came on Yecheskel and said, no, you're only responsible for yourself. What your ancestors did has no impact upon you. This is very difficult to understand. I mean, well, number one, you have to ask the question about almost like a vicarious punishment. And then number 2, once you could justify that, if it was justified enough in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, how could Yirmiyahu come along and say it's no longer theologically reasonable? And then he had the power to change God's mind and say, yeah, by the way, God, vicarious punishment, not a great idea. What does that even mean? So it requires further analysis, but this is like a very important line. Number 4, Moshe Amar b'vanatem b'goyim, that you will become utterly lost amongst the nations. Yishayahu Amar, but Yeshayahu came and said, Yitaka shofar gadol, that there will be this great ingathering one day, and you will not become completely lost among the nations when you are in exile. Related to this, Amarab, mistafina mehai. You know the word mistafina? It's a good word to know. Because in halachic literature, especially in later halachic literature, you'll see statements where an achron, you see many times, is afraid to disagree with a rishon, with someone who came earlier. But I think that my idea is so compelling that I'm going to disagree anyway. So you have to do so, though, with much humility and trepidation. So a common phrase you see is lula de mistafina. If, I'm very afraid. I don't want to disagree. I'm very reluctant but nonetheless, I'm disagreeing. So, just a good word to know. So, Amarav, Mistafin Ma'akra, I was very afraid. I was very concerned when I read the verse, and you'd be lost among the nations. It sounds like while we're in exile, the Jewish people will be completely lost. Maybe, the word avad is the root for avida, hashavas avida, a lost object. So maybe what to me will become lost, but like an object that's being sought after, that God will still seek us out to return us back. Very nice idea. Ella me say with the crab, rather, what was he concerned about? Well, when you look at the end of the verse, it says, and you will be eaten up by the lands of your enemies. So it sounds like we're going to be swallowed up, and the Jewish people will be lost forever. Maybe this is akin to like when someone picks off cucumbers and gourds. Apparently, when you pick those off, you don't take everything off the tree. I'm not really sure why. Just a lack of agricultural knowledge on my part. But essentially, you'll eat some. What's it mean? Will be eaten, will be consumed when we're in exile. Part of us will be consumed, not everybody. So there's a very cheery thought. Don't worry, most of you, a lot of you guys will perish when you're in exile, but a few of you guys will survive. Don't worry about it. That's a very cheery thought, right? Finally, we come to the final story. And here's what we will do. Just to be Yotzei Zayin, we need to finish the Amud. Our policies, we do an Amud, right? We try to do an Amud when we meet. So we'll do the first part of the story up until through the second line on the next Amud. And then next week, we'll have a very short session. I might even just do it Zoom only at that point because it'll be so short. It'll be like probably 15 minutes. I'll prepare some additional things on top of it just to share some more Torah. And then we have our Siyum on December 12th, which I'm very excited about. And again, please sign up if you haven't done so yet. It's a great opportunity. Okay. So here we go. So after the destruction of the second temple, these four rabbinic scholars, they were going on a spazier. They were taking a walk together. And they heard all of these they heard the masses speaking, making noise from the middle of the town plaza. Mil, only 120 mil away. A mil takes about 18 minutes to walk. So 120 times 18, I can't do math on the spot, but if anyone can, that's a lot of minutes, right? Very, very far away. That's the way. It's very far away. And what happened was everyone began to cry, except Rabbi Akiva, who made light of it. He was laughing. Amrlo, why are you so happy? Why are you so joyful at this moment? Amrlahem, why are you guys crying? Amrlo, Goyim halosh mishtachim vatzom. These Goyim, these pagans who are worshiping these idols that have no power, Yoshim betach v'hashkim. They are dwelling in peace and tranquility. Everything is going well for them in life. Meanwhile, the Anu, Beis Hadom Raglei Elokeinu, Sara Ba'esh, V'lo Nivka. Meanwhile, our temple, it has been burnt to crisp. It's been incinerated. And these people are able to celebrate. And we look at us. How can we not cry? Omer Lahen. He responds, this is precisely why I'm laughing. If this is how God provides for those who transgress his will, look at what they get. Kach la'osei ritzono al achas kama v'kama. Then imagine the great reward that God has waiting for those who fulfill God's will. And so if they can receive this much reward in this world, imagine what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in store for us, whether it be during Mashiach or in the world to come. And that brings us to the end of our shiur for today. That's actually a very common theme in rabbinic literature. We saw it in the Mishnah actually previously. There's all sorts of stories like this where you have Bali Tshuva. I'm thinking of like sort of Yossi ben Yoezer. It's one of my favorite stories that I save like pre-Ne'ilah or on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur at some point. Where I try to get everyone to do, like the last pitch for Tshuva. A story about how Yossi ben Yoezer, he was tied up, and the Romans were about to, whoever was it, I guess Romans, they were about to kill him, and he's being brought out, dragged by a horse. Meanwhile, his nephew, who left the Jewish faith and joined the invaders, so he comes over, like, see, you followed the will of God, and look what happened to you. He responds to his nephew and says, this is what God does to those who keep his will. Imagine what God does to those who transgress his will. And immediately upon hearing that, his nephew, according to the account, he performed all arba mitzvos based on himself. All 4 forms of death penalties. By the way, Metzius wise, I have no idea how you do all arba mitzvos based at once on yourself. Somehow he did it, and his neshama, because of that one act of tshuva, his neshama actually reached heaven before Rav Yossi ben Yoezer. So it tells you about the power of one moment of tshuva, and also about the reward that God has in store for those who perform his will faithfully. All right. Any questions? I mean, I imagine not so many. It's an agada to Gemara, not halacha, but yeah, you still have good questions on agada. Okay, Yashir Koach, everyone. Again, God willing, next week, same time, 7 o'clock. I'll try to prepare some supplementary material because it's a shorter Gemara, but I'm not going to purposely drag it out for a whole hour. Don't worry. And please, if you have any questions about the CM, please let me know. I'm very excited to celebrate together. I'm thinking of maybe even just starting the Mishnah Megillah. I'll rehash it when we get together. I'm thinking maybe even just, it's a nice thing at a CM when you finish Masechta, you learn the first little bit of the next Masechta, you make a Haskalah, you jump right in. So just to give you a heads up, if you can't make it, I'll rehash, but I would really love for all of you guys to be there if you're able to.
You're not finishing next week, or are you going to finish at the Siyum, right?
So we're going to finish it. Now, the way it works halachically is that if
do
you're
the
done,
Baruch
you have to make the siyum. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to save a perush on the Gemara. I'm not going to fully explain everything. I mean, I'll explain it basic shot, but I'm going to share a further elucidation of the Gemara at the siyum, and I'll have to figure out how to tie that into a message somehow. Not my first trust. I'm sure I'll figure it out. So that way we could have the siyum at its appropriate time. Okay. Yashir Koach of Freilich and Chanukah, and I'm so, God willing, so excited to be finishing the Sechta together. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good Shabbos.